Hear the hum of those flickering lights, see the empty aisles lined up like dominoes just waiting to fall. The air drops 10 degrees in a heartbeat, making everyone grip their sleeves tighter and shoot nervous glances at each other. On the back wall, a security monitor glitches, static rolling across the screen, like it's trying to hide something. Is everyone just tired, or is something really out there stalking the shadows? When the ordinary shifts to the ominous, what comes next? The clock said it was just after 1:25 a.m., but in the front security office, time felt twisted, stretched out like a rubber band about to snap. Marcus, the night guard, sat beside a row of ancient monitors. Their greenish glow washed out his face. Every so often, the screens would flicker, rolling up static, and Marcus would squint to make sense of the shapes that seemed to sneak through the corners. At first, it was hardly anything, just a blur of movement outside the main entrance, almost like a moth fluttering against the glass. But the store automatic doors hadn't slid open in almost half an hour. He tapped the side of the monitor. The image danced, grainy and hard to read, but now he caught it, a pale face pressed close against the freezing glass, eyes too wide, lips slightly apart. He didn't recognize her. She looked right at the camera as if she'd known it was there all along. Marcus blinked, and suddenly the spot was empty. No sign of the girl, just that lingering white fog from her breath, almost heart-shaped on the glass. He adjusted his chair, trying to blame the vision on the long hours, late nights, or maybe his own imagination after too many years working this shift. But then the sounds started. First, it was a popping noise from the electronics aisle, sharp enough to make him wince. Then a slow, deliberate scrape, like nails on old linoleum. Across the monitors, movement kept cropping up in the dead zone's blurry figures walking between displays, silhouettes passing near the hardware section. Sometimes they'd vanish when he looked directly at the feed. All he could do was stare at the swirling images, feeling like the store layout was transforming into some kind of twisted maze, warped by shadows and bad light. The next hour cranked up the tension. Cameras showed what looked like young men in hoodies, hanging in the edges of the picture. Sometimes one would turn, grin with too many teeth, and step out of view. One leaned into the lens, his hand splayed against the plastic cover, eyes unblinking and face slack like he'd barely slept in days. Another figure, this one thin as a coat rack, paced circles in the cleaning aisle, never looking up, never stopping even as Marcus watched. Audio feeds piped in creaks, scuffs, and that low, echoing hum that meant someone, or something, was in motion just beyond the reach of light. Every fifth noise made Marcus jump, a sharp metallic clang from somewhere by the gardening tools, the rattle of a cart rolling when nobody was supposed to be in the store. Sometimes, the walkie on Marcus's hip would pick up garbled interference, a warbled voice, a quick tinny laugh, that left him frozen in place, waiting for something to answer back. Sarah, one of the stalkers, chewed her thumbnail and peeked through the break room door. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to Marcus, her voice barely above a squeak. He nodded without looking away from the screens. Neither of them wanted to leave the pool of light for the darker corners. Every so often, the radio buzzed. Tom, restocking chilled drinks, called, "Marcus, I'm getting weird sounds near toys again. You checking these cameras?" Marcus tried to keep his voice calm. "Yeah, get back to the main aisle. Don't wander off." Tom didn't answer, but his reflection popped up on one of the corner monitors, glancing nervously over his shoulder as he hustled back toward the front. Marcus could see even through the cheap security camera how much Tom was sweating, his breath coming in short, visible bursts, even though it shouldn't be cold in that part of the store. Marcus started making a list of what was happening, faces he didn't recognize, people appearing near exits, weird noises, and the unmistakable feeling that they weren't alone. He counted 6 different unfamiliar faces across a half hour, too many for a store that was technically empty. All of them stared at the cameras, not away, not darting past or hiding in their hoodies, but locking eyes with the lens like they knew Marcus was watching. Sarah set a box down so hard it echoed. "Please tell me you're seeing this," she muttered as 2 silhouettes slipped between cleaning supplies. Marcus nodded. "I'm watching. Lock the back door." He tried reaching for his walkie but caught a glimpse of something odd, a pair of hands gripping the shelves in the electronics section, pale and slow, running along the boxes. As the figure moved, the motion made no sound and seemed to happen in slow motion, as if underwater. Suddenly, a loud crash made everyone jump. The soda cans stacked by the register clattered to the floor and rolled, one can bursting open and spinning until it hit the cold tiles. Tom's voice cracked over the radio. "I didn't touch them! They just went down on their own!" Marcus checked the feed. In that exact second, the monitor glitched. Static filled the screen, broken by flashes of light and jerky images, the spilled cans, a shadow sliding down the soda aisle, a pair of eyes tracking Marcus's every movement from behind the snack racks. More minutes crawled by with heartbeats pounding in ears, necks prickling with nervous sweat, and eyes glued to monitors that flickered between empty and full of shadows. Soon, a clear pattern started to emerge every time one of the unfamiliar faces glared at a camera. Something fell or moved 3 aisles away. Lights flickered extra hard whenever a certain section of feed picked up movement. Sometimes it sounded like laughter, low, drawn out, and rough, echoing across the open intercom system when nobody was speaking. Marcus started to put the pieces together. The odd locations all the incidents happened in, the timing of the glitches, how the unfamiliar faces always reappeared near the same exits, how items moved and alarms buzzed with no visible cause. It was like someone, or something, was using the chaos to send a message. Or maybe they were playing a game, trying to drive the staff mad, waiting for someone to make the wrong move. Sarah, voice trembling, asked, "What do they want?" Marcus shook his head, mouth suddenly dry. "I don't know, but they're not just random. They're watching us. They know where the cameras are, and they know when we're alone." He tried to shake off the feeling, but it clung to him, thick as a winter coat. Even as he sat behind thick glass, surrounded by screens and lights, Marcus felt more exposed than ever. Like someone was always a few steps behind, just out of sight, listening in. And then everything changed. Not long after the last burst of static, Marcus decided he couldn't just watch from behind the glass anymore. Sitting there with only half the story while his friends braved the floor didn't seem right. He checked his side pocket for his flashlight and pushed open the door to the main store, his boots squeaking on those spotless, blinding white Walmart tiles. The ceiling lights buzzed in and out, giving an eerie, stuttering life to the empty aisles. Every step Marcus took felt heavier, as if he was wading through invisible mist. His breath came out in sharp puffs, even though the AC wasn't set that low. Something about the air had changed. It was colder, heavy, and he could almost taste the metal, like chewing on a penny. He started down the main walkway, lights glaring overhead, his own long shadow thrown across the stacked bins of discount socks, towers of paper towels, and racks of impulse buys waiting for morning crowds. Every so often, one of the lights would snap off, then flicker back, making strange patterns on the polished floor. A stuttering Morse code nobody could read. As he passed by electronics, a loud clatter from the hardware section jerked his attention left. He spun, heartbeat leaping, but saw nothing but a few half-open cardboard boxes and a pile of spilled nails, like someone had knocked them over deliberately. He whispered, mostly to himself, "Probably just the air moving them. Old building." But even as he said it, he couldn't believe it. His footsteps rang out like hammers in the empty store. He passed the toy department, and a weird shiver zapped up his spine. Was it a draft or just nerves? A can of silly string wobbled and fell off the highest shelf, rolling into the center of the aisle right at his feet. He picked it up, checked for a trick wire or an unstable shelf. Nothing. Somewhere nearby, shelves groaned as if settling under a sudden weight. He swung his flashlight left and right, trying to catch any movement. The light trembled like his hand was shaking, sending jittery shadows across racks stuffed with blue jeans and t-shirts. His own face popped up in a security mirror, distorted and ghostly. For a moment, it was so quick he almost missed it. He saw a shape move behind the frozen food sign, tall and quick, too tall to be any coworker. Marcus called softly on his walkie, "Tom, Sarah, anybody else near frozen foods?" Only static answered back. He kept walking. Near health and beauty, the metallic clang echoed again, growling in the vents. It sounded closer now. Not like random noise, but like someone dragging something heavy, maybe a chain or a long pipe, slowly and deliberately. Every hair on Marcus's arms bristled. He checked the end caps, peeking around into the darkness beyond, heart thumping. At the far edge of the vision, a pack of batteries shuffled off a display peg, landing on the floor. He leaned forward, reaching for the fallen box when a blast of icy wind smacked his face. His teeth actually chattered. He took a step back, eyes darting for any vent pushing cold air. Nothing. The entire store seemed to exhale, the automatic doors at the front rattling as if someone pushed against them from outside. He crept past the rows of cereals, his shoes suddenly sticking to the floor, as if the spilled soda from earlier had somehow spread all the way here. The liquids bubbled in their bottles. A low, drawn-out moan rose from the far end of the shelving. Was it a trick of the piping? Or someone calling out for help? Marcus forced himself closer. His flashlight beam caught glimpses, his own shaky reflection in a convex mirror, a flash of something pale darting behind the pet food displays, a ripple of movement in the pile of plastic balls near toys. The light shook, dancing over the empty shelves, making hidden shapes in every gap and corner. A display of Halloween masks stared back at him, grinning skulls, twisted zombie faces, and one mask that didn't quite fit. Its eyes shaded black, mouth twisted in a silent scream. He inched forward, expecting the mask to fall or spin, but it stayed put, almost like it was watching him. As he moved, the shadows in the detergent aisle stretched and twisted, oozing toward him when he wasn't looking. When he swept the beam back, they'd freeze. About halfway down the row, a cold gust whipped the loose shopping bags into the air, sending them soaring like ghosts. Marcus jumped, breathing so loud he was sure anyone, or anything, would hear him. He ducked behind an end cap, pressed close to the metal shelves. His skin prickled, sweat rolling down his neck, hands slick on the flashlight handle. With another breath, he peeked down the next stretch, nothing but silent shelves, boxes hardly moving. But he couldn't shake the feeling that every single item was quietly watching him back. In the small window near customer service, he caught another fleeting blur, a tall figure, just outside the perimeter lights, head cocked to one side. The next second, the flicker was gone. Maybe it was an afterimage, or just his mind playing tricks in the half-light. Still, he kept moving, drawn deeper into the maze of aisles, dread rising with every step. Passing the seasonal display, the metallic sound came back, now right above his head, clanging in the pipes. Marcus flinched, ducked, and spun. The light landed on a dozen Christmas ornaments swinging gently, even though the air was still. He watched them for a heartbeat, half expecting them to spell out a message or shatter all at once. He was starting to realize whatever was in those shadows wasn't following him. It was leading him somewhere. Each clang, each burst of cold, each flicker in the mirrors kept him pushing just a little farther from the safety of the security office. His muscles tightened. Every joint felt like it was wound up, ready to snap. He wanted to call Sarah or Tom, maybe just shout into the aisles, but his voice caught. The store felt so much larger now, so much emptier, but also so much more alive. He made himself stop for just 1 second, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath. For that moment, he heard everything, every tap, every distant footstep, the pipes rattling, and the hum of the refrigerators echoing in his eardrums. He realized that he'd wandered way too far to turn back easily now. He carefully reached up, thumb flicking his radio, still out on the floor, anyone copy. All he got was the crackling echo of his own words, bleeding out into silence. Then something shifted just behind him. A quick exhale, a cold draft, and a rolling can bouncing down the snack aisle. Marcus jumped, twisting so fast his flashlight slammed into the shelf and sent another shock of pain through his wrist. Yet nothing was there, except for the can spinning on the floor, coming to rest at his feet. The only thing that kept him moving was his gut, the sense that turning back would be worse than continuing forward. His pace quickened. steps echoing as he made his way to the end of the cleaning supply section. He stopped, flashlight shaking, and asked himself, "What am I actually looking for?" For a second, the whole store seemed to hold its breath. Then the lights flickered off, plunging him into total darkness. Only his weak, sputtering beam remained, cutting through the black, picking up the faintest edges of the shelves. And that wasn't even the strangest part. With Marcus lost in the maze of darkness, Sarah and Tom huddled together at the end of the break room, both of them anchored by the soft blue pulse of Sarah's phone screen. The building felt less like a store and more like a massive haunted box where every noise echoed twice. Marcus's radio updates had fizzled out, so all they could do was watch the flickering security monitors even though both wanted to look away. Suddenly, a sudden blip in the monitor feed froze Sarah's fingers above her phone. There, between aisles 7 and 10, a shadow glided. It was no one from the crew. It was too tall, too quick, just a narrow column slipping between the boxes and displays. Sarah gasped, grabbing Tom's shoulder. "Did you see that look?" Tom squinted, eyes darting from one monitor to the next. "There. Again!" This time, a silhouette zipped past an end cap, then evaporated. The camera's night mode left streaks, as if whatever moved left a smear on the air itself. But the main monitors caught even more muddy footprints marking the white shine of freshly mopped tiles, crossing the path from home goods straight toward toys. The two stared, minds scrambling for explanations. They called Marcus's radio, but his voice didn't come through. Was it dead, or was he just somewhere the signal couldn't reach anymore? A sudden, sharp laugh rang across the store speakers. It was bright and quick, bubbling up in the gloom, the unmistakable giggle of a child, except the toy section was locked and no one else was supposed to be near. Tom's hands clenched so tight he nearly dropped his radio. "Nope," he whispered. "Nope, nope, nope." Sarah was frozen, her eyes wide as coins. "Did you hear that? Who brought a kid in? Now?" But there was no answer. On the monitor, the shadows thickened. The muddy footprints seemed to multiply, layered over each other, almost like there were several trails crisscrossing. Something small and quick ducked beneath the checkout counters, leaving behind a faint outline, like someone dragging wet shoes in slow, deliberate circles. The child's laughter faded in and out, sometimes cut off by bursts of static. Tom risked pushing open the break room door, peering down the main aisle. His breath mingled with the cold air, and the scent of cleaner rose up, sharp and oddly comforting. Further down, it was pitch black. His eyes struggled to adjust, and shapes in the darkness seemed to move, even when he stood still. Sarah's phone trembled in her hand, the vibration loud in the silence. She nearly screamed. The phone's lock screen glowed, a missed call blinking from unknown. Sarah stared at it, heart thumping. "Do you think Marcus is pranking us?" But Tom didn't smile. He'd never do that. Not after what we've seen. Tom shined his pocket flashlight and started creeping past the end cap, shoes squishing on wet floors. "See that?" he whispered. More muddy prints, smaller now, like from a child's shoe or even a bare foot. They twisted and turned, never moving in a straight line. Near the pet toys, the prints disappeared beneath a shelf. A noise, so faint you almost couldn't hear it, rose up the scratch of plastic against plastic. Something was shifting on the shelves. Tom flashed his light boxes of action figures rocked back and forth in perfect unison, synchronized like they were caught in a slow, invisible wave. Sarah let out a low cry. "Why is this happening?" No one could say. They stood in stunned silence as the laughter returned, more distant, weaving through the racks. A ball bounced out from the toys and stopped at Tom's feet. He kicked it back. It rolled further than he expected, vanishing into shadow where the muddy tracks began. Sarah hugged her arms tight as Tom slowly led her up the next aisle. Each turn brought only more darkness, more shadows pressed into corners, and that bone-deep coldness that stuck around no matter how many times you tried to warm your hands. Sarah whispered, "Let's just leave. It's not worth it." Tom wanted to agree, But something about the situation made leaving feel impossible, like the exit was farther than it used to be. A sudden vibration rattled from the floor. Near the front, they spotted a forgotten phone, its lock screen blazing. The phone buzzed again and again. Finally, Tom scooped it up. No signal, no call history. The wallpaper showed a blurry photo, a group of smiling people Tom and Sarah didn't recognize, standing in front of the toy section's barricaded doors. All faces turned toward the camera, but their eyes looked hollow, as if the photo had been taken by someone, or something, just on the other side of the darkness. A cold, bitter wind snaked through the store. The air carried damp earth, as if someone had dragged mud straight from outside. The muddy trails twisted toward the storage room, looping around the cash registers and under the locked toy section doors. The security monitor nearest to Sarah started flickering again. The feed now showed only static, but in the static's flicker, faces appeared grinning, scowling, whispering things you couldn't quite hear. Sarah stared at her own reflection in the black screen, mouth open, unable to turn away. The shelves trembled. A dozen snack bags all fell at once in perfect rhythm. It made no sense. On the overhead PA, a single burst of static came before the laughter picked up again, louder, broken by the chime of an old music box, out of tune and warbling. Tom stepped closer to the break room, blinking tears out of his eyes. "I don't want to be in here anymore." Sarah nodded, holding up the buzzing phone. She whispered, "Marcus, please, come back." But there was no answer. The footsteps and laughter faded as if sucked into a cold emptiness far away. Shadows pressed in tighter around the two, and the aisles seemed to stretch and twist, rearranging themselves just to keep the unknown out of sight. It was all becoming too much. The laughter, the muddy trails, the strange faces dancing in the monitors. Every moment felt loaded with a truth they couldn't ask out loud. Someone, or something, was there with them, watching, waiting. And then everything changed. Marcus's world narrowed to a single path bathed in wavering flashlight. With each breath, he could feel the frigid air burning his lungs. He stepped into the corridor that wound along the back wall of the store, the space now pitch black apart from his weak beam. His palms sweated so much, it felt like he'd drop his flashlight any second. The shelves loomed next to him, rising higher than he remembered, a canyon of cardboard and plastic packaging. He paused for a second, hearing nothing but his own pulse, and maybe, just maybe, the faint click of something metal tapping 3 aisles away. Marcus's heart raced so loud he thought it might actually give him away. He lifted the radio to his mouth and whispered, "Sarah, Tom, anybody." His words sounded too loud, bouncing off the empty shelving. No reply. Suddenly, the temperature crashed, cold biting down to the marrow. A white cloud puffed from his mouth, hanging too long in the flashlight's cone. He moved forward, step by cautionary step, his leg muscles twitchy, as if warning him to run. But running wasn't an option. His body wouldn't respond, paralyzed by some awful, invisible force. Still, he forced the next step and the next. Halfway down the corridor, a sharp crack rang out, like wood splitting. Marcus flinched. He swung the flashlight and caught a blur, something hunched, impossibly tall, retreating around the far bend at the end of the shelving. His mouth dried to dust, and his hands shook worse than ever. That thing's footsteps echoed, a slow, wet slap on tile. He pressed on. The stale air carried the scent of wet earth and faint rot. His nerves screamed to turn back, but his brain wouldn't let him. He pressed his back against the shelves for courage, waiting for his heart to calm, but it just hammered harder. A deep breath. One more step. The flashlight flickered. That was when he saw it. A shape lurched into view, blocking the aisle ahead. In its shadow, the overhead lights seemed to dim even further. Marcus froze, unable to shout, unable to blink. The figure was monstrous. It towered, hunched beneath shelves that should have been out of reach for any human. Every inch of exposed skin, if that's what it was, seemed too thin and too pale, stretched like old paint peeling from a wall. Its face, if you could call it that, was almost human, but wrong. Mouth too wide, lips curled in a sneer, eyes deep and bottomless like a black pit. Marcus's breath caught as the creature drew close. Its chest rose and fell, harsh and ragged, each cloud of breath rolling through the Kmart cold air. He met its gaze, stupidly, bravely, he never knew. It looked through him, eyes full of secrets Marcus didn't want to know. He tried to scream, but it was just a choking, squeaky sound, something a scared dog might make. The monster tilted its head. For a split second, it seemed to smile, or at least pull its lips back in a way that revealed more teeth than anything living should ever have. The room buzzed with some low-frequency thrum Marcus could feel more than hear, as if the very air was trembling out of fear along with him. He wanted to run, to backpedal, but every muscle locked tight. His heartbeat pounded so hard it blocked out all other noise. Suddenly the creature lunged forward. The aisle lights snapped off, plunging them in near darkness save for the sputtering cone of Marcus's dying flashlight. The beam caught monstrous claws, fingers curling, reaching, each one tipped in something sharp and glimmering. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for pain, for the end, for something. But there was only air and a sudden deafening silence. He dared to open one eye. The creature didn't touch him. It hovered over him, sniffing, cold air rushing in waves. Time felt warped, rubbery. Marcus could barely tell if seconds or hours had passed. He blinked sweat out of his eyes, stomach twisting in knots tighter than barbed wire. This close, he could see every wrinkle in the thing's cheeks, the strange whirl of scars running down its neck, the way its eyes flashed a monstrous red in the beam. It leaned close, exhaling a gust of frozen air on his face. Marcus's teeth chattered, knees nearly giving out. The creature whispered in a voice so quiet, Marcus felt it inside his ears. Leave. In that moment, his senses blew wide open. A flood of memories, old and new, every weird night shift, every chill, every unexplained thing in the store, they all rushed back like a wave. He staggered backward, slamming into the shelving, hands clawing for anything to hold. The thing didn't follow. The cold subsided, and the aisle lights flickered on just long enough for Marcus to see that the creature was gone, vanished without even a footstep. He gasped, gulping air, body flooded with adrenaline and confusion. All that energy, all that fear, stuck to his bones like glue. An overwhelming panic crashed down, and Marcus burst into a sprint, his legs finally unlocking, his lungs burning as he tore through the aisles, desperate for light, for noise, for anything familiar. He passed displays he couldn't remember stacking, flew by mirrors that showed his wide, terrified eyes. He nearly bowled over Sarah and Tom, who were standing frozen, faces sheet white with terror. They'd seen something too, something that didn't make sense. Marcus couldn't say a word. His mind replayed the thing's eyes, its voice, the terrible chill that nearly split him open. He staggered to a stop, gripping a shelf to stay standing, and finally whispered, "We need to leave. Now." And in that breathless moment, 3 people stood together in the early morning store, forever changed, knowing nothing would ever be the same after what they'd seen. But the question is why? The relentless buzz of fluorescent lights returned with the first hint of sunrise, but any sense of normal was long gone. The Walmart night crew huddled together in a makeshift circle by the front registers, exhaustion painted on all their faces. No one spoke at first. The store felt even emptier now, as if it was holding its breath. Every scrape of a shoe, every click of the clock seemed too loud. Marcus was the first to move. He pulled his jacket tighter, shoulders hunched, and slipped his security badge onto the counter. There was a tremble in his hand, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Tom caught his eye. "You okay?" was all he could manage. Marcus shook his head. "I'm done. I'm not coming back. Not ever." The words hung in the air, heavier than even the thick morning silence. Sarah and Tom, still pale and shaken, didn't argue. They could see it in Marcus's face. He wouldn't talk about what happened, not even when management showed up 2 hours later and asked for his version of events. He just packed his things and left, the automatic doors sliding quietly shut behind him. Rumors spread fast, as always. The overnight shift swapped countless texts and nervously recounted every detail, but nobody could agree on what they actually saw. Some swore the monitors caught a ghost, others blamed stress, exhaustion, or a trick of the lights. A few whispered about the child's laughter echoing in the dark aisles, the muddy footprints that no one could explain, and the chilling cold that had nothing to do with the store's faulty air system. Management watched hours of security footage, sometimes in groups, sometimes by themselves behind closed doors. Most of what they found looked normal, but not all. In several clips, a pale, grinning face flashed too quickly to ID. Another showed all the toy action figures shuddering on their shelves with no one nearby. One grainy frame, frozen by a hesitant assistant manager, showed a shape crouched in the cleaning aisle, too blurry to see clearly, but the outline was wrong, as if someone had drawn a person from memory and missed every detail that made them human. Cleaning crews worked double shifts, scrubbing muddy prints from the aisles. But every morning, new tracks reappeared. Smaller, looping, sometimes leading in circles where no one had walked. Nobody felt safe alone. Heads swiveled at every noise. A busted phone, its screen shattered, sat untouched in the break room. Nobody wanted to turn it on. It didn't take long for word to get out. Customers picked up on the tension. "Why does it feel so cold in here?" one customer joked, though their laugh was forced. Another asked what the childlike giggle was coming from the speakers. The manager waved it off, but nobody could explain it. Someone started a post online. "Is our Walmart haunted locals chimed in with stories about weird lights near the store at all hours, or old tales about the land before the shopping center ever existed?" Management didn't offer answers. They insisted there was nothing wrong and filed fresh incident reports about broken shelves and missing items. But even they sounded nervous, cutting their own late shifts short, jotting statistics but never lingering. For Marcus, life after that night was quieter, but not easier. Sleep came hard. Sometimes as he tried to drift off, his ears would ring with distant laughter, a giggle just outside his window, or the creak of something heavy dragging along the floor upstairs. He tossed and turned, questions whirling. Did he really see that creature? Was it real, or just exhaustion? What happened to the others on the footage? He never reached out to Sarah or Tom, and they never called him. Maybe they all hoped silence would keep the nightmares at bay. The store itself seemed changed, weighed down by stories and speculation. Staff turnover shot up. Customers asked more odd questions. And sometimes, right at the edge of dawn, employees would swear they heard faint footsteps or saw a small handprint on fogged glass near the entryway. Even the bravest kids rushed their parents if they strayed too far from the main aisle. And that security footage copies found their way onto a local online forum, spreading unease further. Some frames looked faked, grainy, and hard to parse, but a few images sent chills down the spine of anyone brave enough to watch. No one could agree on exactly what was there, but everyone agreed it wasn't just tired imaginations or bad lighting. People kept asking questions the store couldn't answer. Some called for an investigation, others just stayed away. It wasn't just about what happened that night. It became about what might happen the next time darkness settled over those wide, echoing aisles. There's a weight to the unknown, an invisible footprint pressed into the memory of every late shift, every lonely trip to the back room, every unexplained chill. Even now, whenever the store is empty and silent, some swear they can still hear laughter bouncing between the shelves. The aisles that once felt safe now seem full of eyes watching from the corners, waiting for the next curious soul to wonder what really happened after the lights went out. And that's the thing. Maybe we'll never know what was real and what was just fear taking shape in the shadows. But after that night, nobody ever looks at Walmart at midnight the same way again.